Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, top Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat is reportedly in critical condition in Israeli hospital. Meanwhile, Israelis continue to regulate to life after the second full nationwide lockdown. And finally, American expats in Israel get set to cast their ballots from abroad. Major news this morning. PLO official Saeb Erekat is in critical condition, admitted to hospital in Israel with coronavirus-related complications. Nittany Manson with the story.
Longtime senior Palestinian negotiator and PLO official Saeb Erekat is reportedly in critical condition, suffering from severe respiratory complications consistent with the COVID-19 virus. Erekat currently sedated and connected to ventilation in Jerusalem's Hadassah Medical Center. Erekat disclosing his infection with the coronavirus on October 8th. And witnesses saying that the 65-year-old Erekat has now been placed on a stretcher from his home in Jericho as he was taken to Hadassah on Sunday. Then hospital staff later confirming that his condition has deteriorated, adding that his case is particularly challenging given the lung transplant he received in 2017 and the resulting suppression of his immune system. But at any rate, he's reportedly being prepped for transfer to hospital in Tel Aviv while receiving round-the-clock care. Israeli hospital officials acknowledge the political challenges associated with his admission, and a few Israeli politicians having even suggested that his admission be conditioned on the return of Israeli citizens being held captive by Hamas in Gaza, while criticizing Defense Minister Benny Gantz for approving Erekat's transfer. Nittany Manson reporting.
Meanwhile, Israelis are also battling as we regulate to the new normal under loosened coronavirus lockdown measures. Israelis are entering the second day out of full lockdowns. Coronavirus infection numbers continuing to drop overnight, resting now at just 3.5%. Likewise, the national tally for active coronavirus infections has fallen to below 30,000 for the first time since early September. But with the number of serious cases still at 619, at least 212 on ventilation, and 2,209 killed, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is repeating calls to continue honoring the regulations remaining in place.
ההישגים פה מרשימים. אנחנו ראינו שהסגר עובד במהירות. אנחנו הגענו לירידה כבר מתחת ל1,000. לצערנו אנחנו רואים, כפי שחזיתי, שמדינות אירופה עוברות אותנו במהירות, כמעט כולן. עוברות אותנו משום שהם לא עשו את הסגר הזה, אבל אנחנו צריכים לשמור על ההישגים של הסגר, ביציאה הדרגתית ובמילוי ההנחיות, ואני מצפה שכולם ישמרו על ההנחיות, כולם, בלי יוצא מן הכלל. יש אגב ערים אדומות שמראות כרגע, לפי הנתונים של הלילה, שמתחילות לצאת, אם אני טועה, 2 ערים אדומות, מתוך 5, נכון? מתחילות לצאת, אבל אנחנו עדיין לא מוציאים אותם, אבל זה תלוי בקיום ההנחיות. ואני קורא לכל הציבור, בערים האדומות, לציבור החרדי, קיימו את ההנחיות. אנחנו נאכוף, אבל יותר חשוב שאתם תערפו על עצמכם, לא פחות חשוב.
Well, already, many Israelis are sharing their cautious approval of the new measures, starting with parents whose young children are now allowed to return to kindergarten, preschool, or daycare.
I'm very happy to bring her here. I am a bit worried, but I hope that everything will be fine. There won't be another lockdown, and we'll go back to our routine.
It's actually very exciting because for weeks we've been stayed during the lockdown, and it's really difficult, so the kids are very excited, and so do we.
In spite of the clear instructions, however, many ultra-Orthodox communities, including in red cities, Bnei Brak, Modi'in Ilit, and Beitar Ilit, have reopened all of their schools. And meanwhile, in a controversial move, roughly 30,000 more yeshiva or Haredi seminary students aged 17 and up will be returning to class at over 400 institutions across the country, supposedly in a capsule system and in coordination with the government. That, plus another 13,000 yeshiva students not included in the plan, who will likely reopen illegally as well. Acting under direct instruction from leading Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. 3 advisors to government coronavirus czar Roni Gamzu are now threatening to resign over the illegal school reopenings. Now, speaking of maintaining vigilance, Zaka Search and Rescue is now calling on the public not only to continue following with health guidelines, but also to check in with our neighbors and our community members on a daily basis, especially if they're old or alone. And this after the Volunteer Emergency Response Group reports discovering their 121st body this year, found days after the person had died. The latest being a 42-year-old man from Ashdod who was found when his neighbors told police that a terrible smell had begun leaking into the stairwell. But coronavirus aside, people are passing away alone, and that's an ongoing issue, with 130 people reportedly dying alone in Israel in 2019. Zaka officials saying that with pain and tears and respect, we handled the deceased at this difficult scene, adding that if you have a lonely or childless neighbor, check on them at least once a day and report to welfare authorities in order to save their lives. Meanwhile, Zaka and Yad Sarah organization are also now pairing together to provide emergency alert buttons and sensors to the elderly to prevent such incidents in the future. Moving on, among the biggest challenges now facing Israel with this pandemic is the rapid growth of poverty and disenfranchisement, in large part as a consequence of the lockdowns economically. But there are those who are trying to lend a helping hand. And joining me with more is Shalom Zaidel from Yad Ezra V'Shulamit. Shalom, thank you so much for being with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, so how does 2020 compare to 2019 in terms of, the hunger or poverty rate, et cetera?
Needless to say, it's exceedingly much worse than last year. Our services are exponentially rising. The stats are in front of me. Our amount of food baskets that we give is from 3,500 a week to 4,500 a week. That's more than a 30% increase. There are hundreds of thousands of new poor that are seeking our services, and we have to be there for them.
How are you keeping up with the rise in demand?
Again, Israelis are being more generous, frankly, especially when it comes in terms of food donations. Roughly 70% of the donations that we get is food, either from farmers, from Erekat and other organizations, and we're keeping up with it. Frankly, we've had an unbelievably successful campaign recently with our people outside of Israel. They've really stepped up for us and for the poor and the children of Israel. And, we're doing relatively well, considering everyone's under, significant problems economically and employment-wise. We're doing okay, and we need people's support as much as possible because we're doing our part in trying to help out these terrible increases, frankly, of the new poor that are now exist in Israel.
All right, so, is the government or the IDF helping you in your mission?
The IDF is, we work in conjunction with the IDF Home Command on a number of cities, and we've delivered, like I said, tens of thousands of packages over the Yomim Tovim, over the recent high holidays. And in some cities, because of the seger, because of the lockdown, they have helped us. They've helped us actually deliver our packages to central locations within the cities that we do. We usually go up to 40 cities. Because of the seger, we've done about 17 cities over the last few weeks, and the IDF have been instrumental in helping us out in packing and in distributing the packages that go to the poor. Yes, and they have been helpful in that regard.
This sounds like an amazing organization, an amazing mission, desperately needed. To everybody watching, please see what you can do. Visit yadezra.net. We'll put it on screen. And again, Shalom, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Aaron.
Now, while Israeli citizens are fighting a pandemic, Israeli politicians, doing what politicians do, are fighting amongst themselves. Israeli Finance Minister Israel Katz now responding to ultimatums from Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi. Ashkenazi of the Blue and White Party is telling Israeli Ynet News that a national budget for 2020 and 2021 must be passed together if elections are to be avoided. But Finance Minister Katz of Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party, meanwhile, is retaliating, saying that the foreign ministry should stick to matters of foreign affairs, while accusing the Blue and White Party of engaging in political extortion. And this as Katz is arguing that the 2020 budget is ready for a vote now, and that the 2021 budget can be worked on next.
אם עכשיו נעביר את תקציב 20 תוך שבוע בממשלה ומיד בכנסת, כל נקודת היציאה של דצמבר נעלמת. אין בחירות, לא יוצאים לבחירות בדצמבר, ואז לקראת פברואר אנחנו צריכים להביא את התקציב. אם כחול לבן רוצים לפרק את הממשלה, שיתמכו בכנסת בחוקים להקדמת הבחירות. מספיק לקשור את זה לתקציב ולהתמם ולהיות כלכלנים גדולים שמספרים לי איך צריך להעביר את זה. אני מוודא שכל העצמאים וכל השכירים וכל בעלי העסקים מקבלים עד אמצע השנה הבאה תשלומים, ובזכות זה הם יכולים גם להמשיך להתנהל מול המצב הקשה. אני מקווה שבקרוב יגיע השלב הנוסף של עסקים מקבלי קהל תוך כדי שמירה ברורה על הבריאות, וזו הדרך צריך ללכת ולא לערב כל הזמן. מה זה האולטימטום הזה? אני דוחה את האולטימטום על הסף, ואני אומר, אתם רוצים לעשות שיקולים פוליטיים ולא ממלכתיים, אתם רוצים בחירות, אני אוודא שיהיו בחירות.
Now, Twitter will now ban posts that deny the Holocaust. A Twitter spokesperson said that posts that deny or distort violent events, including the Holocaust, will not be allowed on the platform from now on. The social media giant releasing a statement strongly condemning anti-Semitism, saying, quote, hateful conduct has absolutely no place on our service. We also have a robust glorification of violence policy in place and take action against content that glorifies or praises historical acts of violence and genocide, including the Holocaust. Twitter is now the second major social media network to ban Holocaust denial after Facebook announced recently last week that it would ban posts that deny or distort the Holocaust as well. Now for another first, Etihad airliner 90607 has just landed in Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, making it the first direct passenger flight from the United Arab Emirates to arrive in Israel. And this just a day after the official normalization of ties between Israel and Bahrain as well. So here to further discuss the evolving Middle East is former advisor to President Shimon Peres, former deputy ambassador to Egypt, and CEO of the Ruth boutique strategic consultancy firm, Middle East expert Ruth Wasserman-Landa. Ruth, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure, Aaron.
All right, so what does this new peace with Bahrain change on the ground with respect to Israel-Arab relations in the region? Is it any different to the situation this summer after announcing ties with the UAE?
I think it's a little bit different. First of all, the UAE is a very, very multicultural, international setting. People grow up there educated and professionally with tens, if not hundreds, of different nationalities. And the atmosphere is relatively very, very open and very encompassing, embracing. Bahrain is a little bit more conservative. Also, it seems as if almost it's a bit of a part of a body of Saudi Arabia. And therefore, so long as Saudi Arabia itself is not making or taking the step forward to make full relations or diplomatic normalization with Israel, it's a kind of a blessing that it's giving. It's okay. It's a kind of a green light because Bahrain is under its auspices, so to speak. And therefore, I think it's a very, very positive sign, a wonderful new step towards more peace agreements. And I think that the fact that, to see the Israeli delegation stepping off the plane in Bahrain for the first time, it's quite incredible. It's moving to the point where, as a diplomat who lived in an Arab country for 3 whole years and speaks the language, it's really beyond exciting.
Well, so I want to ask you a little bit more now about, because you mentioned Saudi Arabia and how some of these other countries may be responding to them. So, I know that there are some states who are actually now threatening the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and of course Saudi Arabia. The Islamic State, ISIS, now joining the fray, saying Saudi oil pipelines and economic structures should be targeted. The Arab states who make peace with Israel, are they endangered any more than they would be if they hadn't?
Well, I would say that certainly not. On the contrary, first of all, ISIS is not a country, the last time I checked. And it's actually quite ironic that ISIS and Iran seem to threaten Saudi Arabia at the same time. Being on quite different, let's say, ends of the same map, political map, Sunnis and Shiites, and with very differing interests. I think that the security status of those countries that are moving forward and courageously embracing Israel, they are doing this out of very, very focused and out of a very, I would say, deep understanding that their security status is improving rather than deteriorating, given the specific agreement. And not only that, you know, the F-35s that are very much in dispute in Israel, taking away the edge, the so-called qualitative edge from the security situation in Israel, is definitely something of a bonus for the UAE.
Well, I think there are definite bonuses for every side. I hate to cut you off, but Ruth, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, well, moving on now from Israel-Arab relations to relations with Israeli Arabs. The Atidna organization is working hard to build more successfully integrated Israel. And I'm very pleased now to say that co-CEO of Atidna, Dr. Dalia Fadila, joins me today to tell us all about it. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right, so I think just to give our viewers a little overview, first of all, what is Atidna?
Atidna is a coalition of Arabs and Jews, social leaders, educational leaders, who decided it's time to change the paradigm of what it means to be an Arab in Israel, what it means to be a Jew in Israel, what it means to be engaging in the state of Israel as the citizens of the state.
And how long have you been working on at this mission?
The whole story started 2 years ago with friends who brought friends, thinking that in the light of the multi-layered crisis in Israel in general and the Arab community in particular, the fact that inside the Arab community in Israel there is a leadership crisis, a health crisis, employment crisis, educational crisis, the fact that gaps are widening in between Arabs and Jews, and the fact that fear and suspicion is also tearing us apart, we decided that we want to do things together. And it evolved into conversations of knowing each other, learning about each other, and then a decision of starting Atidna.
Yeah, so tell us about some of the projects, because I know that you have a lot of youth projects and all these really beautiful things that I saw pictures on your Facebook earlier.
So basically, the strategy was investing in building a community of young leaders from the age of 10 into the age of 25 plus. And this community of leaders is divided into a multi-age project, We are investing in starting a youth movement that based on the principles, on the values of respect, strengthening Arab identity and also citizenship and integration inside Israel. Besides the youth movement, we're also investing in scholarship for students. We're encouraging and enhancing the commitment of Arab young people to their academic studies, especially now in the context of Corona, COVID-19, and the fact that 1/5 of Arab students in Israel are deciding not to continue their studies. Along with that, we decided we also want to widen the range and expand the number of young people who are part of the Startup Nation, part of Israeli High Tech, and this is why we're partnering also with Elevation on starting a high tech project and investing more into bringing our young people into that place.
All right, well, it sounds like an incredible organization, such an important mission. And I want to tell everybody at home that if you want to learn more, please visit atidna.org. That's ATIDNA.org. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. And I would like to say one final thing.
Please.
Atidna is exactly what Israel needs now. Atidna is exactly what the Arab community needs now. Atidna is the future. And especially now, we need to be together in leading our present and future as both Arabs and Jews inside Israel. And also the Arab community needs a leadership that moves forward and positively rather than backward.
Dr. Fadila, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, another news taken for granted in much of the states. Israel is now getting set to adopt a badly needed recycling measure. The Minister of Environmental Protection, Gila Gamliel, now announcing the extension of the plastic bottle return law to include 1.5-liter drink sizes. With just 54% of larger bottles being recycled, Gamliel is accusing manufacturers of failing to meet recycling targets, thus forcing her hand. And the new extension, which will save Israelis an estimated 56 million shekels annually, will go into effect October 18, 2021, giving the sector a whole 12 months to prepare for the changes in tandem with the challenges posed by COVID-19. And finally, with United States presidential elections coming in hot this November, it may be too late to order your absentee ballots if you haven't already. But for Americans in Israel who are prepared and eligible, the election is in full swing. Nittany Manson reporting.
With hundreds of thousands of American voters living here in Israel, both Democrats and Republicans abroad are campaigning hard. The presidential election overseas now already beginning to count absentee ballots. But as expected, concerns of expat voters differ slightly to the majority of those held by their American Jewish counterparts. The coronavirus crisis, economic policy, and the candidates' policies on Israel being among the most influential topics at the ballots. So with that in mind, then, it comes as no surprise that many Israelis are touting the Middle East accomplishments of President Donald Trump.
I think it'll be a tremendous effect. I mean, look at what Trump has done already in his 4 years for Israel, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and with his economic and political policies that have helped the relations between the U.S. and Israel will continue to become even stronger when he is reelected this 2020.
I think that Trump is good for Israel for many reasons. I think one of the biggest things he did was he took a different approach to the Middle East peace. He took more of an economical approach, which I think what it'll do is it'll turn the Middle East into something similar to the EU, but to have states of Muslims, mostly Muslim states, and Israel that can cooperate economically with each other. And when you have economic cooperation and people are all living in good times, it makes good roads to peace. And I think that's the most important thing for Israel is the peace.
Again, though, not everyone's jumped on the Trump bandwagon.
Overwhelming majority of the Democratic Party, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, have a decades-long record, of being staunchly pro-Israel, unquestionably pro-Israel. And it's a pro-Israel that stems from a deep understanding of Israel's geostrategic role, also in relation to the United States' interest in the Middle East. And there is no room for anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party.
Chair of Democrats Abroad Israel, Heather Stone, likewise saying they've even recently doubled their membership.
I think that the voters in Israel will have a big impact on the election, particularly in several states and districts. And voters overseas in general will have a big impact. We've seen increased interest in voting, and registrations are up about threefold, and membership in Democrats Abroad has doubled, and we believe that it's looking like we are going to be the margin of victory in several places.
But still, no one is going down without a fight, leaving the result of American Israelis' votes a mystery, at least for now.
People in the United States are many, many millions who love Israel, and they know how much the administration has done for Israel in these past 4 years. And they want to see people here in Israel saying thank you. In fact, that's what that sign over there says behind me. It says, "We owe a debt of gratitude to Donald Trump for all the things he's done for Israel, for America, and indeed for the world."
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear and comfortable with a low of about 66 degrees Fahrenheit or 19 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect more sunny and clear skies again, with highs hovering around 88 Fahrenheit or 31 degrees Celsius. And now before we go, of course, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Dog park? Take a bath? Dog park? Bath? Oh, that's so cruel. Oh, what a smart dog. My dog does the exact same thing, oddly enough. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.39 shekels to the American dollar, 2.57 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And for more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.